You know, family reunions are supposed to be about bonding, right? A chance to reconnect, laugh together, and make memories. But for me, they were always a reminder of how invisible I was. It wasn't that my family didn't love me. They did, in their own way. But there was always that one person who made everything feel, well, smaller. That person was my sister, Emily. She always had this way of making me feel like I didn't matter, like I was the side character in my own life, while she was the star. It was something she did without even trying, like it was in her nature. She was the pretty one, the charming one, the one who could walk into a room and immediately become the center of attention. And I was just Violet, the quiet one, the one who never made waves. I had learned to deal with it. I kept my head down, smiled through it, and tried to fit in, but it never worked. It wasn't until that one reunion, last summer, that I snapped. It started like any other reunion. The whole family gathered at Aunt Linda's house, everyone crowded around the living room, catching up. I was sitting in the corner, nursing a drink and half listening to the conversations around me when Emily walked in. She was wearing that dress, the one she knew would turn heads. Deep red, fitted perfectly to her. As usual, she was the first to get all the attention. She greeted everyone with that big, warm smile, while I sat in the corner, unnoticed. I used to tell myself I didn't mind, that it didn't bother me. But deep down, I could feel it. Every glance, every laugh, every compliment she got. It felt like a jab to the chest. The night was going fine until Emily pulled her little stunt. We were all sitting around the dinner table when she started talking about her big promotion at work. She went on, exaggerating every little detail, making sure the entire room knew she was the top dog. I should have been happy for her, but instead, it just made me feel small. And then came the moment. Emily, with that self-satisfied grin, turned to me and said, "Violet, are you still working at that dead-end job of yours? I heard they were downsizing, so I guess you're lucky to still have a job." The whole room went silent for a second. I could feel the heat rise to my face, but I just sat there, pretending like it didn't affect me. But it did. It stung. It was the kind of public humiliation that cuts deep. Everyone laughed, but it wasn't a laugh of joy. It was the kind of laugh you make when you're uncomfortable, when you don't know what else to do. And I sat there, holding back the tears, fighting the urge to stand up and walk away. But I didn't. I couldn't. I told myself I'd be the bigger person, that I'd just let it slide. But something inside me broke. Something deep. Something that had been building up for years. That was the moment I decided I couldn't take it anymore. And that was the moment I started planning my payback. The humiliation at the reunion lingered for weeks. It wasn't just the insult. Emily had humiliated me before, in little ways, big ways, and everything in between. But this time felt different. This time, it wasn't just a momentary sting. This time, it felt like the last straw. I was done being the quiet, overlooked sister. I was done being the one everyone just assumed would be there to clean up the mess. I had been the support, the shoulder to cry on, the one who held everything together when no one else could. But where was my recognition? Where was my moment? I had always tried to be the good sister, the one who didn't cause drama, who didn't stir the pot. But this time, the idea of taking control of my own life, of doing something about the endless stream of insults and underestimations, felt empowering. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't thinking about how everyone would react to my actions. I wasn't thinking about how Emily might feel. I wasn't even thinking about the consequences. I was thinking about me and how I was going to make her regret ever crossing me. I spent the next few days in a haze of quiet planning, no longer letting my emotions guide me. I was focused. I'd had enough. And it wasn't going to be just some petty revenge. No, this time, I was going to show her who I really was. My first step? Understanding Emily's weakness. Everyone has one. No matter how perfect they seem on the outside, no matter how flawless their social media photos are, there's always something they want to keep hidden. For Emily, it was her secret fear of losing control. She was always in the spotlight, the center of attention. The thought of not being the most important person in the room scared her. She thrived on validation. That's when I realized the perfect strategy. If I could knock her off that pedestal, if I could make her feel as small and insignificant as she made me feel, then I would truly have my revenge. The next few weeks, I started gathering information. I knew Emily well, maybe better than anyone else. I knew what she was up to, what she was working on, what mattered most to her. It wasn't hard to figure out, really. She lived a life of constant bragging, of always showcasing how perfect everything was, how flawless her relationships were, how perfect her job was. But like I said, everyone has their cracks, and I had started to see the fractures in Emily's perfect world. I knew her biggest pride and joy was her relationship with her boss, Kevin. She often talked about how he trusted her with important projects and how she was his number one choice for promotions. It was obvious how much she needed his approval. Emily wasn't the kind of person who could thrive on her own. She relied on others, especially men, to validate her worth. So I started with Kevin. I knew Emily's deep need to impress him, to make sure he thought she was irreplaceable. It wouldn't be hard to plant a seed of doubt. All it took was one conversation, a small hint, a little whisper of information that could throw everything into chaos. I didn't want to ruin her career entirely, just enough to knock her down a few pegs, to remind her that she wasn't untouchable. But this wasn't going to be enough. I couldn't just make her second-guess herself at work. No, I needed something bigger, something that would tear down the walls of her perfect world. I started digging into her personal life. It wasn't something I was proud of, but it was necessary. There was one thing Emily didn't know about me. I had always been observant. I paid attention to the little details. I remembered things people said, things they didn't even realize they'd said. I kept track of her friends, the people she talked about most, the ones who seemed to admire her. I knew she was hiding a few things about her relationships, things she kept behind closed doors, things she didn't want anyone to know, and it was these hidden secrets that I was going to use to bring her down. One afternoon, I bumped into one of Emily's close friends, Sarah, while I was out running errands. Sarah had always been friendly with me, even though she was in Emily's inner circle. I didn't expect her to give up any real secrets, but sometimes people talk. Sometimes they share things without realizing it. "Hey, Violet," Sarah greeted me, smiling warmly. "How have you been? Haven't seen you around lately." I smiled back, playing it cool. "I've been good, just busy with work. How's Emily?" "Oh, she's fine," Sarah said casually. "She's been dealing with some personal stuff, though. She's been kind of on edge lately, but I think it's just the stress from work. You know how she is." I nodded, pretending to be interested. "Yeah, I know. She does take things so seriously." Sarah looked around, making sure no one was close, and lowered her voice. Honestly, Violet, I think there's more to it. I think I think Kevin might have been flirting with her. Emily's been getting all these special perks, and she's acting like nothing's going on, but I don't know. It's just a feeling I get? That was all I needed. I knew exactly how to use this information. I didn't need to know the details of whatever was going on between Emily and Kevin. I just needed the doubt, the seed of suspicion. The rest would fall into place on its own. As the days went on, I carefully crafted my strategy, making sure each step was calculated. The pieces were starting to fall into place, but I knew I had to be patient. Emily was used to getting everything she wanted, but I could see her beginning to crack. The tension at work, the odd comments from people, and that nagging feeling about Kevin. It was starting to weigh on her. I could see her slipping up in small ways, and that's when I knew it was time to step up the game. I had to take my revenge in a way that would not only humiliate her, but also make her question everything she thought she knew about her perfect world. I was going to reveal the cracks, and she would have no choice but to fall apart. But I had to be careful. I couldn't just rush in. Emily was smart. She wouldn't fall for something too obvious. No, I needed to make sure my moves were subtle, like a whisper in the wind, so she wouldn't even know what hit her until it was too late. The first thing I did was plant a few subtle hints about her relationship with Kevin. I knew Emily wouldn't let her guard down around her colleagues, so I went in another direction. I started talking to her closest friends, the ones who admired her, the ones who believed her to be untouchable. I'd casually bring up how Emily had been acting strangely at work lately, how Kevin seemed to be favoring her more than usual. I'd let those whispers grow, slowly, until they became loud enough to catch her attention. It didn't take long before Emily's friends began asking her about her relationship with Kevin. They didn't know I had been the one to plant the seed, but I could see the cracks beginning to form. Emily was careful. She denied everything, of course. But the more she denied it, the more suspicious they became. It was only a matter of time before Emily started feeling the heat. As the rumors spread, Emily's once perfect image began to tarnish. The people who used to look up to her started whispering behind her back, and the air around her changed. It was as if her facade was crumbling, piece by piece. The cold, calculating part of me was satisfied, but I didn't stop there. No, I needed to go deeper, to destroy the last thread of her self-confidence. The next step was more personal. I had already learned that Emily had been hiding her insecurities, her fears about not being able to maintain her perfect life. I knew exactly how to use this against her. I decided to confront her directly, but in a way she never expected. I waited until one evening when we were alone, after everyone else had left the family gathering. She was standing by the door, talking about how she had just gotten a new promotion at work, as if everything in her world was still perfect. I listened, nodding, pretending to be happy for her. But then I asked the question I knew would make her uncomfortable. So, how's everything going with Kevin? He seems to be getting really close to you lately. Emily froze for just a second. Barely noticeable, but enough for me to catch it. I had hit a nerve. What do you mean? She asked, her voice tight. Kevin's just been helping me with some projects. You know how it is. I smiled, pretending to be casual. Oh, sure, I know how it is. But isn't it kind of odd? I mean, you're getting all these special privileges, and the way he looks at you? I paused for effect. It seems like you're getting more than just professional attention. Her face went pale. She tried to laugh it off, but I could see the fear behind her eyes. She knew exactly what I was implying, and for the first time I saw her lose control. The confident, flawless Emily was no longer there. Instead, there was a woman who was starting to crack under the pressure. "Violet, stop it," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's not like that. You don't understand." I didn't let her off the hook. "You're right. I don't understand. I don't understand why you always have to be the one who gets everything handed to you while I'm left in the background. I don't understand why you feel like you can humiliate me in front of everyone, but I have to sit there and take it." Her eyes widened, the reality of what I was saying finally sinking in. I could see the struggle in her eyes. She wanted to fight back, to deny it all, but deep down, I knew she knew it was true. She had never taken me seriously, never seen me as a threat. And now, the tables were turning. She was the one feeling small, the one who was starting to doubt everything she had built her life on. The moment was perfect. I had made my point. I had planted the seed of doubt, and I was beginning to feel the satisfaction of watching her squirm. But as I looked at her, I couldn't help but feel a little pity. For all her bravado, for all her success, Emily was just as vulnerable as I had been all these years. The difference was, I had learned how to hide my pain. I had learned how to make it work for me, and now it was her turn to learn that lesson the hard way. After that night, something shifted in Emily. The once unshakable confidence she always wore like armor now seemed fragile, like it could crumble at any moment. I could see it in her eyes every time we spoke, the uncertainty hiding behind the facade. She was trying so hard to keep up the act, to pretend everything was still perfect, but I could tell she was unraveling. And that was exactly what I needed. For the first time in years, I felt like I was finally in control. It was like the world had shifted, and I was no longer the quiet, overlooked sister. I had been patient. I had planned carefully, and now the consequences of her actions were beginning to take shape. Emily, for once, wasn't the one getting the attention. It was me. The next few weeks were tense. Emily was becoming more paranoid, more defensive. She started lashing out at people at work, snapping at her friends, and acting out in ways I had never seen before. The rumors about her relationship with Kevin had grown, and her colleagues were starting to question her professionalism. But Emily wasn't the kind of person who could accept responsibility for anything. Instead, she tried to push the blame onto others. She pointed fingers, played the victim, but the truth was catching up with her. It wasn't just the rumors. Her insecurity was starting to leak into her personal life as well. Her friends, the ones who had always adored her, began distancing themselves. They weren't sure what to believe anymore, and that doubt, that uncertainty, ate away at her. She had been the one to put everyone on a pedestal, and now that pedestal was crumbling beneath her feet. But Emily's downfall didn't stop there. It was time for me to make my final move, to really finish what I had started. One afternoon, I got a call from one of Emily's colleagues. It was Sarah, the same one who had let slip about Kevin's actions, the one who had unknowingly helped me plant the seed of doubt. Sarah sounded frantic, almost worried. "Violet, I don't know if you're aware, but something's going on at work with Emily. She's been making some really questionable decisions lately. I think it's affecting everyone. People are starting to talk." I leaned back in my chair, a quiet smile tugging at the corners of my lips. It was time. Emily had dug her own grave, and now it was time to bury her with her own lies. I knew exactly what I needed to do. I had already planted the rumors about her and Kevin. Now I needed to push her over the edge, to expose her in front of everyone. I had to make sure she understood the consequences of what she had done to me, of how she had humiliated me in front of our family. But more than that, I wanted her to understand that no one, not even her, was untouchable. I made a few phone calls, sent a few carefully worded emails, and by the end of the day, I had secured exactly what I needed. A meeting with Emily's boss, Kevin. It wasn't hard to get his attention. After all, Emily's name was on his mind more than ever now, and I knew exactly how to leverage that. The meeting was set up for the following day. I knew that Emily would be there, desperate to explain herself, to try and salvage whatever shred of dignity she had left. But it wasn't going to be a conversation. It was going to be a confrontation. I was going to make sure that Kevin knew exactly who Emily was. I wasn't just going to ruin her career. I was going to make sure she knew I had been the one pulling the strings all along. The next morning, I walked into the meeting room with a calm, collected expression. Emily was already there, her arms crossed, her face set in that defensive mask she always wore. Kevin was sitting across from us, looking between us, trying to figure out what was going on. Emily wasn't going to see it coming. I started the conversation softly, almost sympathetically. Kevin, I wanted to talk to you about something important. Something about Emily and her behavior at work. Emily's eyes widened. Violet, what are you doing? She hissed, her voice low, but the panic was clear in her eyes. She knew what was coming. She just didn't know how much I knew. I kept my gaze fixed on Kevin, ignoring Emily's outburst. You see, Kevin, I continued, Emily has been doing some things that, frankly, I don't think are appropriate for someone in her position. Things that I'm sure you'd want to know about. I know you've been under the impression that everything is fine, but the truth is, things aren't what they seem. I pulled out the evidence. Text messages, emails, and other documentation that painted Emily in a light she never imagined could exist. It was a clear picture of someone who had used their charm to manipulate people into giving them what they wanted. I knew this would hit hard, but I didn't care. I had suffered enough in silence. Now it was her turn to feel the weight of her actions. Kevin was stunned, his face shifting from confusion to disbelief as he read through the documents I handed him. Emily, meanwhile, looked like she was about to explode. Her mask had cracked completely. Violet, please, she begged, her voice trembling. Don't do this. But it was too late. The damage had been done. Kevin looked up at Emily, his expression hardening. I had no idea, he muttered, clearly processing everything. This is unacceptable. I sat back in my chair, watching Emily's world fall apart. The satisfaction of watching her squirm, of seeing her realize the extent of her own downfall, was more than I could have hoped for. But as I watched her unravel, I couldn't help but feel a strange emptiness. The payback, the revenge I had so carefully planned, didn't feel as sweet as I thought it would. Sure, I had gotten my justice, but I had also destroyed someone I had once called my sister. The days after the confrontation felt strange, almost hollow. Emily's world had completely crumbled, and I had orchestrated it all. The work rumors were out of control. Her reputation was in tatters, and Kevin had made it clear that their professional relationship was finished. Her career, her entire identity, was suddenly hanging by a thread. Yet, as I watched her retreat into herself, I felt this strange emptiness that I hadn't expected. Was this what revenge really felt like? I had imagined the moment so many times in my mind. The rush of satisfaction, the sweet victory of watching her get exactly what she deserved. But instead, it felt like a void. I had spent so long holding on to my anger, so long plotting every detail of my payback that I hadn't considered what would happen after I had destroyed her. I couldn't shake the image of her face in that meeting room, the shock in her eyes, the desperation in her voice as she pleaded for me to stop. "Please, Violet, don't do this," she had begged. And I had stood there, stone-faced, with no emotion showing, because it was too late. I had already made my decision. But what about after the revenge? What was left for me now? Emily hadn't spoken to me since that day. It wasn't just silence. It was a cold, heavy distance that stretched between us, thicker than any conversation could bridge. I had expected her to lash out, to try and get back at me in some way. But instead, she just disappeared. She was still in the house, still living there, but she didn't look at me. She didn't speak to me. It was like I wasn't even there. I had been so focused on making her suffer that I hadn't thought about what I would feel afterward. I hadn't considered that revenge might not be as sweet as I had imagined. I had wanted her to feel small, to understand what it was like to be overlooked, to be cast aside and belittled in front of everyone. And I had succeeded. But in doing so, I had isolated myself too. That's when I realized something. The revenge I thought would give me closure, the payback I thought would make everything right, had actually made everything worse. I had hurt her. Yes, I had broken her down. But I had also broken something inside myself. I had spent so long focusing on making her regret what she'd done to me that I hadn't realized I was losing a part of myself in the process. The guilt was starting to creep in. It was small at first, like a whisper in the back of my mind. But the more I thought about it, the louder it got. Was this really who I wanted to be? Was this the person I wanted to become? Someone who took pleasure in someone else's misery? Someone who thought that tearing another person down would make me feel better about my own life? I couldn't shake the feeling that I had taken it too far. I had crossed a line that couldn't be undone. It wasn't just about the humiliation at the family reunion anymore. It wasn't just about getting back at her for the years of feeling invisible. It was about something much deeper, something that now made me feel sick to my stomach. One evening after dinner, I found myself standing in front of her bedroom door. Emily hadn't been out of her room for days, and I could feel the weight of the silence pressing in on me. I wanted to talk to her, to make things right, but I wasn't sure how. What could I even say? After everything that had happened, how could I ever fix this? I knocked softly on the door, my heart pounding in my chest. For a moment, there was nothing. No sound, no movement. I knocked again, a little louder this time. "Violet?" Her voice was small, almost like she didn't want me to hear it. I wasn't sure if it was anger or sadness in her tone, but I felt it all the same. I felt it in the pit of my stomach. "Can we talk?" I asked, my voice shaky despite myself. There was a long pause before she finally spoke. "What is there to talk about?" I didn't know how to respond. What could I say? I wanted to apologize, but how could I apologize for something so final? How could I take back the things I had done? "I'm sorry," I said, my voice cracking as the words left my mouth. It felt strange, so foreign, like it wasn't even me saying them. "I didn't mean to hurt you this way." She didn't say anything at first. Then, after a long moment of silence, she whispered, "You wanted to hurt me, Violet." You wanted to destroy me, and you did, but I don't think it's made you feel any better, has it? I didn't have an answer, because she was right. It hadn't made me feel better. It had made everything worse. I didn't want to destroy you, I finally whispered, barely able to keep my voice steady. I don't know what I wanted anymore. Emily didn't respond. The silence stretched between us, and for the first time in years, I truly felt how far apart we had become. I had set out for revenge, thinking it would fix everything, but all it had done was create a distance between us that could never be bridged. And in that moment, I realized something important. Revenge may give you a momentary sense of justice, but it never brings true peace. The price of revenge isn't just what you take from the other person. It's what you lose within yourself. The silence after that conversation was deafening. I had poured out my heart, admitted my mistakes, but there was no catharsis, no resolution. Emily didn't forgive me, not in the way I had hoped, and I couldn't blame her. How could she? After everything I'd done, after the way I'd humiliated her, shattered her life. I didn't deserve forgiveness, but I still wished for it, secretly, desperately. Even after all the planning, the strategy, the payback, a part of me just wanted to hear her say that it was okay. But Emily didn't say anything. Instead, she stayed locked away in her room, and I stayed in mine, the walls between us thicker than ever. The house, once full of laughter and warmth, felt hollow. It felt like a prison, each room echoing with the weight of unspoken words. I had achieved what I set out to do, but it didn't feel like victory. It felt like the end of something, and I wasn't sure what. Days turned into weeks, and Emily didn't come out. She avoided family gatherings, made excuses to stay in her room, and when she did speak, it was only to our parents, who seemed oblivious to the tension. To them, everything was fine, but to me, everything was broken, and I couldn't fix it. I watched from a distance as Emily faded into herself. It was like watching someone lose their spirit, piece by piece. The light in her eyes that had always been there, the one that shined when she walked into a room and everyone turned to look, had dimmed. She wasn't the same person anymore. And in a twisted way, that made me feel worse. I thought revenge would bring closure, but instead I found myself spiraling. The anger that had once fueled me now seemed so far away, replaced by guilt that weighed me down. What had I accomplished, really? I had gotten back at her, yes, but I had also destroyed the bond we once shared. The bond that had, for years, been the only connection I had to the world. One night, as I was sitting alone in the living room, I saw Emily through the window, standing outside in the backyard. It was a quiet night, and the moonlight cast long shadows across the yard. She was staring at the sky, her face lost in thought, her posture slumped. For a moment, I just watched her. My sister, the one I had once looked up to, the one I had tried to love despite everything that had gone wrong. Now she looked broken, and it was my fault. I stood up, my legs feeling heavy, and walked outside, stepping carefully into the cool night air. I didn't know what I was going to say. I just knew I couldn't stand the silence any longer. "Emily," I called softly, stepping toward her. She didn't turn at first, but then she slowly glanced over her shoulder. Her eyes were red, but she didn't try to hide it. "What do you want, Violet?" she asked, her voice cold, distant. It was like I was talking to a stranger. I don't know, I said, feeling the weight of the words in my chest. I just wanted to talk. She raised an eyebrow, then sighed, turning fully toward me. What's there to talk about? You've already done what you set out to do, haven't you? You've ruined everything. What more is there? Her words hit me like a slap. And they were true. I had ruined everything. She had every right to hate me, to blame me for what I had done. But I couldn't just walk away from this. Not now. Not after everything that had happened. I'm sorry, Emily, I said, my voice shaking despite myself. I know I hurt you. I know I can't fix it, but I didn't want to lose you. She looked at me for a long time, her expression unreadable. You already have, she said quietly, before turning away, walking back toward the house. I stood there, frozen, as the door closed softly behind her. The weight of her words sank deep, and I realized just how far I had fallen. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It wasn't even about justice. It was about me trying to repair something I had broken. But now it was too late. For the first time, I felt the full impact of what I had done. Revenge had consumed me, clouded my judgment, and left me with nothing but regret. I had gotten what I wanted, but at what cost? I had destroyed the one person I cared about most. And now I was left alone, with nothing but the bitter taste of my own actions. The following days were filled with a quiet sadness. Emily still didn't speak to me, and I didn't know how to fix it. I couldn't undo the things I had done, no matter how much I wished I could. What was the point of revenge if it left you feeling emptier than before? And as I sat in the silence of the house, I began to understand the truth of it all. Revenge doesn't heal. It doesn't bring closure or peace. It only leaves scars. Scars on both the victim and the one who sought revenge. The hardest part wasn't seeing Emily suffer. The hardest part was realizing that I had become something I never wanted to be. Someone consumed by anger. Someone willing to destroy a relationship for the sake of a fleeting sense of justice. And now, with nothing left to hold on to, I realized that revenge had never been the answer. Weeks passed, but the silence remained. Emily and I avoided each other like strangers. The house felt colder now, the air heavier with the weight of unspoken words. I tried to move on. I went about my daily routine, pretended like everything was fine, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I had lost something valuable. And no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't fill that void. One evening, after yet another day spent in quiet misery, I sat in front of the mirror in my room. I stared at my reflection, at the person I had become. I used to be someone who believed in right and wrong, someone who prided themselves on fairness. Now I was someone who had crossed every line, someone who had thrown away their morals in the name of revenge. It felt like I had sacrificed a part of myself in the process. But as I looked deeper into my own eyes, I realized something. I had the power to fix this. I had the power to rebuild what I had destroyed, even if it seemed impossible. I didn't need to carry the weight of my past mistakes forever. The first step was acknowledging them, and the second step was making things right with Emily. The following morning, I went to her room again, this time with a different kind of purpose. I wasn't going to beg for forgiveness. I had learned that much, but I could apologize, truly and deeply, without expecting anything in return. I knocked softly on her door and waited for her voice to call out. Violet? Her voice, soft but cautious, came through the door. Can we talk? I asked, my voice steady but my heart racing. There was a long pause before I heard the sound of her footsteps approaching. The door opened slowly, and there she stood, looking just as exhausted as I felt. But there was a change in her eyes, less anger, more resignation. I'm sorry, I said, not waiting for her to say anything. I know I ruined everything. I hurt you in ways I can't even explain, and for that, I'm truly sorry. She stood there in silence, her arms crossed, her face unreadable. You didn't just hurt me, Violet, she said quietly, her voice hoarse. You destroyed our relationship. You made me doubt everything I've ever worked for. You made me feel small. I nodded, knowing she was right. I had done all of that and more. I know, and I can't take it back. I can't undo the damage I've done. But I want to try to fix things. I don't want to be the person who caused this anymore. Emily looked at me for a long time, her gaze intense. I don't know if things can ever go back to how they were, she said, her voice quieter now. But I appreciate that you're finally taking responsibility. That means something. It wasn't much, but it was enough. I had expected anger, rage, but instead she gave me something far more valuable. A chance to rebuild what I had broken. It wasn't going to be easy. It wasn't going to happen overnight. But I finally understood that healing, real healing, doesn't happen through revenge. It happens through honesty, through vulnerability, and through the willingness to admit that you've wronged someone and want to make it right. And so Emily and I began the slow process of rebuilding. We didn't go back to being the way we were before the betrayal, but we started talking again. Slowly, over time, we found our way back to each other. Not as the sisters we once were, but as two people who had learned the hard way that revenge wasn't the answer. It didn't bring peace. It only tore people apart. But forgiveness, even if it takes time, can heal the deepest wounds. As I look back, I realize that the lesson I learned through all of this is simple. Revenge doesn't give you closure. It only leaves more scars. True peace comes from healing, from owning up to your mistakes, and from finding the strength to rebuild what you've broken, no matter how hard it may seem. If you've enjoyed this story and want to see more gripping, emotional tales that will keep you on the edge of your seat, make sure to hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss the twists and turns that are coming next. Thanks for watching, and remember, revenge isn't always the answer, but forgiveness just might be the key to true peace.